I am Daniel Hughes, and welcome to Book 101. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years, and today I have my special guest. He is the author of the book Raising Four Dimensional Children in a Two-Dimensional World, no other than Mr. Tim McCarthy.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you for inviting me. I'm happy to be here. Uh, I am, and I think I have just about always been an educator. I got my degree in teaching and taught in the public and private schools for about 10 years. Got a master's degree in education so I could become an administrator. And then moved on. I had also been practicing the martial arts and moved on to become a full-time martial artist. So I was not only teaching uh, the academic part of the students, I started teaching them more physical activity, mental activity, emotional confidence, and moral activity. Martial arts very important to not only know how to hit somebody, but know when to hit somebody and when not to hit somebody. And so I enjoyed that more than the classroom teaching. And as part of that, uh, was part of a larger organization that popularized the after school martial arts and summer camp programs uh, all across the US, and I'm sure in Canada. You've seen the signs after school martial arts or summer camp martial arts. We popularized that program. I put my educational background into it to help the instructors not only teach martial arts, but teach some other valuable life skills. And then when I retired, I decided to make that program more or less available to the average parent. It's not a martial arts program, it's a balanced program for raising children physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. And that was the point. That's what I'm doing now. That's what I'm trying to get out to the world. I call it the owner's manual you didn't get with your child.
Oh, sounds interesting, Mr. Teams. What do you think is the big difference of being educator and of being a martial arts?
Well, it depends on your focus. Some martial artists are there to learn how to fight. And the guys who are in the UFC who are trying to make a living fighting aren't really concerned about education. They're concerned about their skill and winning almost at any cost, but their focus is winning. For me, martial arts was about education. I didn't want to be the greatest fighter. It helped me learn how to seek perfection. You can't achieve perfection, but you can have the relentless pursuit of perfection and try to get better every day, better today than you were yesterday. And being an educator, I wanted to instill that in my students, and that's students of all ages. I've taught people in their 70s, I've taught people 4 and 5 years old. Try to instill in them that pursuit of excellence, again, not only physically in the martial arts skill, but mentally, emotionally, and spiritually or morally.
Yes, indeed, people. So you're being educator for 40 years. What is the Eastern and Western educational philosophy?
The Eastern educational, well, let's start with the Western, which is the school system. And let's even go before that. Originally, uh, education was mentorship. Your parents would teach you, you would learn from them. Uh, you could go to a guild. You could go to the tinsmith guild or the blacksmith guild or the carpenter guild, and your parents would put you in the guild. You would have a master carpenter who would teach you the skills of carpentry. You would eventually become a journeyman carpenter, and then possibly a master carpenter yourself. In many ways, that's still the Eastern way of education, in that you would have a master, as in the martial arts, a master instructor. A student would become an instructor or a teacher, eventually become a master and or grand master if he has masters under him. In the Western world, we developed the industrialization of society, where we needed people to be able to follow along, work in factories all day, kind of a mindless day of assembling cars. And the classroom, the modern day classroom, is suited for that. You have your students sit in nice little rows. Everybody learns the same lesson at the same time. Uh, individuality is encouraged, but up to a point, because you have to conform to the rules and to the system. And so, although that has a value, one has to learn how to get along. I think there's a much greater value, and I think modern education is going that way, towards individuality, where you explore your own talents and skills. And so you may have the college track in high school, or you may have the track that goes on to trades, and you can take shop or auto shop, or learn to become a computer programmer instead of a doctor or a lawyer. And so that the Eastern way of education, again, is more inclusive. When you go to the Western school, they don't have much PE. They're losing out so much on the musicality. It's more academic. What can we do for your brain, for your mind? And to me, the Eastern way is a more balanced education: physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual.
Very well said, Mr. Tim. So, what do you think? What are the modification that we need to make our education better in the 21st century?
Well, since I left the classroom years ago, I found out they do have a socio emotional education. And every day there's a curriculum where they do some emotional education. And that was noticeably missing, not only in my parenting and my parents raising me, but in the school system that I worked. Now, I chose to work in the private school system. So we actually had religious education in my school when I was in the private schools. So there was moral education. Unfortunately, moral education has been legislated out of at least the American school system. Uh, Different organizations saying you can't teach my child your religion, which makes sense. But there has to be some kind of moral education, a right or wrong. And in order to do that, you need two things: you need the tools, and you need the practical application of those tools. So, I'm sorry, the knowledge. Number one is the knowledge. Number two is the tools. So the knowledge is, you need to understand, first of all, that there are four dimensions to education and how they develop. The emotional education of a 2-year-old who's going through the terrible twos is very different than that of a preschooler, and very, very different from that of an adolescent. And there are lots of stages in between. So what I did is I studied child developmental psychology, what's happening in the brain and what the child is capable of at each age. And of course, in school systems, they have lots of studies, they have lots of research and experts in those fields. Unfortunately, the average parent doesn't. And so, what I set out to do in my owner's manual for children that you didn't get when you had your child is give them the information. All right, at 2 years old, this is what your child's brain is capable of. At 5 years old, this is what it's capable of. At 7, at 10, at 13. And so I go through the development of the brain, and then what the child is capable of physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. Just for example, if you've ever tried to play catch with a 2-year-old, their brain doesn't work fast enough. You throw the ball, it bounces off their chest, and then their hands come together. They just don't, their brain doesn't work fast enough to react that way. But if you know that, you can sit down on the floor and you can roll the ball, and they can catch it and they can roll it back. Or you can play with a balloon, and the balloon is slow enough for them to catch and send back. So that's just a simple physical developmental thing that you may not realize about a 2-year-old. But I help give you the knowledge, and then I give you the tools in the form of over 400 activities like that that are age appropriate. So, if you want to play catch with your 2-year-old, you either sit down or you play with the balloon. Now, when you play catch with a 5-year-old, he can catch the ball and he can start to wear a glove and start to learn to play baseball or basketball or football and actually catch the ball. So that's the sort of things that I set out to do to help the parents.
Very well said, Mr. Tim. What age did you realize that you're good in writing?
I guess it was in high school I started writing stuff that, uh, and I shared it with some of my friends and they thought it was good. And so, that you never know yourself if it's good until you have an audience and they tell you it's good. Then, of course, as I studied literature and became an English teacher, I had a pretty good idea of what's good and what's not. And then, as I got out into the world and I became a professional writer, uh, I just had to literally grind out uh, every day. Just there was no time for writer's block. I had a newsletter, I had a magazine, I had a book to get out for my company. And so it was a matter of sit down, think about it, or interview somebody, and then put it together with proper grammar and proper expression.
Interesting. So, who are your favorite authors that influence you the most?
Well, I always fall back on Alan Watts. He was a great philosopher, and he had studied Eastern and Western, not only philosophy, but religion. That had always been a passion for me is, this world is interesting, but is this world the end of things or is there another world? And regardless of whether there is or there isn't, how do I live my life best in this world? And so he was definitely a big influence. I've read Tony Robbins off and on recently, and again, he has a passion for learning, a passion for helping people in some non-traditional ways. So those are two of my favorites.
So, if you describe their writing, what is it or what are they?
Yeah, again, the Tony Robbins not only motivational in his physical presentation when he talks, but in his books, but also just the kind of knowledge, the neuro-linguistic programming that was not common knowledge uh, that he popularized, discovered. He didn't discover an NLP, psychologists did, but he brought it out to the public. And I find that as a model, that's what I want to do. I've done the research on child developmental psychology. I want to get it out there to the parents so they understand how their child is thinking. And then my experience with the tools, with all the activities we did in our programs to help them be able to put that theory into action with specific activities to help their child grow in each of the 4 dimensions.
That'd be awesome, Mr. Tim. But before we go on, I want to shout out for my ranking tops according to the last 30 days. And of course, in Canada, I got number 70 on the Apple chart, Egypt at number 98, United Republic of Tanzania 113, Nigeria 168, Rwanda number 44. Zambia, I got number 8 on the Apple chart. Mongolia at number 40. Pakistan at number 44. Cameroon at number 76. United Arab Emirates at number 143. United Kingdom at 167. Libya at 172. Algeria at 188. Vietnam at 204. Georgia at 206. South Africa at 215, and last but not least, Jordan at 236. Thank you for supporting this podcast because this podcast is created to empower writers all over the world, like Mr. Tim McCarthy. So, Mr. Tim, let's talk about your book.
Raising four-dimensional children in a two-dimensional world.
How did you craft it?
Well, I took a look around and I think we're living in a two-dimensional world. And that two-dimensional world is the telephone screen, the laptop, the tablet, and even the television. That's a two-dimensional world that has length and width, but no depth. I want to get the kids off of those screens and back into the real world where there are four dimensions. There's length, width, depth, and as H.G. Wells said many, many years ago, time, duration. If something doesn't exist for a period of time, it's not real to us. So there are four dimensions in the real world, not the computer world. And I parallel that to the four dimensions of human development: the physical, the mental, the emotional, and the spiritual. And so if if you find you're living in a two-dimensional world and your child is spending too much time on the laptop, on the phone, on the computer, get them into the real four-dimensional world and develop them physically. Get outside, move, have some fun in the real world. Mentally, sometimes the computer does that very well. Sometimes there are other activities that you can do. Emotionally, not that good on the computer. That's person to person. You need to see the person's face, listen to their tone of voice more than just what's written or texted. And finally, spiritually or morally, you have to know the difference between right and wrong. And apparently, the internet is more concerned with clicks and views than it is with right or wrong. So let's get our kids back in the real world.
So, how to persuade parents to bring their children in the real world?
Well, it starts early. I quote one study in my book where the average parent thinks that it's that children learn just as well from a telephone or a tablet as they do from a person. Absolutely not true. Okay, they need your touch, they need your voice, they need your attention, and that's early. Now, when you get into the age where the kid has their own phone and they spend the day texting rather than playing baseball or soccer or whatever could be playing, they're missing out on not only their childhood, but on their physicality, on their health. And then when you get to the teenage years, they're probably doing their homework or their research on a computer. And that's understandable. But then if they want to be gaming and texting their friends, again, where's the physicality? Where's the exercise? Where's the face-to-face learning? It used to be kids would go out in a group and they would go someplace. And whether that's for a walk in the woods or a swim in the river or to the mall, they were at least learning about each other, how to interact with people. On Facebook, not happening. And actually, on Facebook and Instagram, you're not even supposed to have an account until you're 13. So what is a 10-year-old doing on social media? Get them off the phone and control it early and say, okay, here's a phone. It's for emergencies. You call me if you're in trouble. You dial 911. But then you have to put certain controls on it and maybe even lock the phone down and definitely take it away at night, away from the child, away from the adult, because of who knows what's happening with EMFs? We don't have any studies on that and whether or not they're hurting. So put the phones in a separate room, turn them off at night, let them recharge, and then start over again in the morning.
Yes, very well said, Mr. Teams. What do you think? What is the pros and cons of children having two-dimensional world than for a four-dimensional world?
Well, just by the math, if you're living in a two-dimensional world instead of a four-dimensional world, you're missing mathematically half of life. Two is half of four. But as I said, in the two-dimensional world, let's just go to television. Most kids shows, if you're on a regular television network, are paid for by sponsors, and those sponsors are usually sugary cereal companies. And so even if you're watching a children's show with a good message, the commercial comes on and tells them that they need sugar pops or sweet snacks or whatever the cereal's name is. And then they want to eat these unhealthy foods. And there have been studies that kids who watch that will eat more and will eat less healthy foods than those who don't watch those. So that's a very simple thing. Keep your kids off the TV. If you're going to use educational programming, use a paid service where you actually pay them and they don't have commercials. As far as
Yes.
the telephone, I mean, what is this? What does a 7-year-old need a telephone for? As I said, maybe in an emergency, if you're in a situation where the child could get lost, and you can track the phone, or he can call you if daddy doesn't pick him up from school or whatever. That's possible. But as far as spending hours and hours on the phone, no. When you come home from school, go out and play. Get outside with your friends. Uh, Join the soccer team. Join the basketball team. Go to dance class. Go to gymnastics class. My favorite, go to martial arts class, and get some physical exercise. And then discuss things. If you read a story together, and that's read a story together, you talk about the story and say, well, why do you think this character, even if it's a children's story, why did the little bear say this? What's going to happen next in the story? Why do you think that's going to happen? And that's the sort of four-dimensional education where you're thinking about the emotions of the characters. You're giving him a chance to not only understand but express what he understands, and then to predict the future. Well, I see a pattern. I think this is what's going to happen next, and why. And then at the end of the story, if it has a good ending or a bad ending, why do you think that happened? What can we learn from that? If you were in that situation, what would you do? That sort of discussion of a story, very important for the four-dimensional education.
Yes, indeed, Mr. Team. But before we go on, I'm inviting you to listen to my other podcast, Food 101, on our third season with Chef Alessandro, one of the best executive chefs in one of the best restaurants in downtown Toronto. Our last episode, we talk about Sammy Fredo, people. It's hot, hot, hot. And this dessert, Italian dessert, will refresh you. So try to listen to our latest episode, Food 101, in any platform. Plus, one more, our book, Food 101, Volume 1 Basic, is already out, available on Amazon and leading online bookstores worldwide. It's all about our 100 episodes. And it's all the basics that you need to make your food delicious. So please do grab a copy. It's already have a volume 1, volume 2, and volume 3, and more volumes to come because we have already on the third season. So Mr. Team, what do you think the best highlight of the book, Raising Four-Dimensional Children into a Dimensional World?
I'm proud of one thing is that I combine fiction and nonfiction. I have the research of nonfiction, I have the activities of my experience, but I also introduce each chapter with a short story. And the short story kind of presents a night and day or a black and white choice. Where do you want to be, this parent or that parent? And so we tell the story of a parenting style that may not work so well, and then the positive side, how you could improve your parenting style by acting this way. So I think that's a very helpful illustration for each age group, so that the parents have, I guess, a model, a story to emulate, and then of course the theory, the information, and the practice, the activities.
Do you think nowadays in the 21st century that parenting is getting less and less because of our busy world?
I'm afraid that most parents have allowed the two-dimensional device, the telephone or the tablet, to become the babysitter, because it's very easy to say, here, play with this, and then go about your life. It's also very easy to put them in front of a TV and walk away. And as I'd said earlier, the TV is designed to create needs, to say, you need this, you need that, which takes away the child's confidence. If he needs something, he's not whole, he's not complete, he's not content. If he's working on a game on the computer, he's not getting that human interaction. So I think it's a big problem. And we need to get the kids off the screens and back into the real world, into the four-dimensional world.
What do you think the ways as a parent to make our kids go out to in a dimensional world?
Well, leadership. You should, first of all, have them do as you do. If you spend your day in front of a screen looking at a phone, they're going to think that's the way to behave. If you are an active person, if you go out, if you bicycle with them, if you go to the gym, if you have teams where you go play softball or soccer or whatever, if you just go for walks in the neighborhood and go to the park with your child, that's an example. So you set the example of what you do, then you show them how to do it. And so your 2-year-old is not going to go to an aerobics class, but they could go to the park with you. They could go for a walk. Soon they could go for a bike ride. You could go for family bike rides. You could go boating. You could go swimming, skiing, depending on where you are. So you lead by example, but you also show them how to do stuff when you're not around. So you teach them how to kick a soccer ball and how to kick it against the wall and how to get better by kicking it this way or that way. And so a little bit of coaching, again, leadership, to show them what they can do when you're not around.
Yes, indeed. Raising four-dimensional children in a dimensional world. What are your struggles in writing with?
Struggle was finding the research, and that took a couple of years of researching each age group. I had a clear idea of what I wanted. Then I had to gather all my activities, which I had gathered for years in my job, and show how they were appropriate for each age group and what they would develop in the child. And then it was just a matter of time, sitting down every day, writing for part of the day, and then getting out and living my four-dimensional life the rest of the day. And then I faced COVID, of course, and decided not to publish during COVID, and waited until people uh, would be out, could get out and about before I released it.
Raising four-dimensional children in a dimensional world. What is your inspiring message for those parents out there?
Well, as I said, I consider it the owner's manual you didn't get with your child. If you're pregnant and don't know what to do and need prenatal care, I've got the answers. If you've just got the baby home, you bring this beautiful child into the world and you really don't know what to do with it, I've got your answers. If you got a 2-year-old going through the terrible twos, you don't know why, I explain it and I help you deal with it. If you've got a child getting ready to go through puberty and you don't want them to be surprised by the changes in their body, I've got guides on what to say, age appropriately. If you've got a teenager who's acting like a 2-year-old, I've got ways to talk to them that were probably different than the way your parents talked to you. I've got activities to do with them to move them along. And again, every age, physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. And if you go to Amazon, you'll have to type in raising 4-dimensional. And once you type in that, you should see it, raising 4-dimensional children in a 2-dimensional world. Or you can go directly to my website, which is the number 4, D as in dimension. So it's 4D-2D.com. You can't forget the dash, you end up in China somewhere. So 4D-2D.com. You can get the ebook for under $5, and you can only afford $1. You can get the chapter for your child for under $1 US. So I'm not looking to get rich. I'm looking to help people with the problems they're having with their children.
Yes, people, let's support Mr. Tim because this book is phenomenal, especially for the parents out there, busy in a busy world in the 21st century. Let's mold our children the way it should be. Let's mold our children just like before, because comparing before and right now, there's a big difference. Our children is becoming less and less productive, which is not good for their health. This is not good for their brain. This is not the children that we bringing up to the next century. This is our legacy, people. This is the legacy that this is are the children that brings out our legacy, and let's raise them with excellent, let's say superb care, because they are gift from God that we need to take care of them emotionally, physically, and mentally. Equip the next generation. Right, Mr. Tim?
Absolutely. If you want to raise super kids, become a super parent. And I've got the handbook for you.
Okay, Mr. Tim, thank you for your time. Monica people, see you soon.